Hello, everybody. I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings. So Black Trillium. This is an interesting series. Um, the reason the picture you're looking at is like this is because the copy I have is a hardcover and it has a dust jacket. So I was able to basically flatten out the dust jacket, which is cut off on the left. But I'll be honest with you. You go all the way to the left, and there's only just some more mountains, so you're not really missing anything off of the very, very far left side. Anyways, Black Trillium, as you can see on this cover, was co-written by Marion Zimmer Bradley, Julian, and Andre Norton, who are all, of course, big names in the fantasy biz. And it's a story about three sisters, triplet sisters, actually. As you can see, three young women on the front cover, although why Claudia on the left, the one in the pseudo Robin Hood wear there, um, which is odd because she doesn't have a bow at any point, and I think the artist gave her a bow partly because they were dressing her up. They were getting her dressed up like Robin Hood to, make her sort of do the female warrior thing, and the artist probably wanted to sort of bracket them with Haramis having a staff on the right and Kadia having a bow on the left, and if you're wondering, Anijal is the one in the middle. Um, it's a little odd that her hair is dark, because the book seems to indicate her hair is more of a russet brown than that color, but whatever. One should never look at cover art for really accurate depictions of the story in a book, because it's relatively rare that you get a cover artist who has gone to the effort of really paying attention to what's going on in the book. And also, of course, there's a certain amount of laxity because you're trying to not picture a specific scene in the book, but trying to evoke the internals of the book generally. Anyways, um, so you have these triplet sisters, and there is a sort of a sorceress-guardian of the kingdom that they live in, and these three princesses, because they are princesses, get their country is invaded by a king who has become corrupted or was never a very good person to begin with. It's not entirely clear, I think, by the end of the book. And his sorcerer, Origastus, who is actually behind everything because Origastus is a very bad man who wants to, take over the world and stuff. And they get sent off on quests. It's a fairly bog standard setup in a lot of ways. There's a lot of fairy tale, sort of classified into this in terms of triplet princesses. Each of these princesses is very much an archetype. Haramis, at the start of the book, is the heir to the throne, and she's very calm and very rational and very scholarly and intellectual. Kadia, the second born of the three, is very much the woman warrior sort of stereotype, the one who spends all of her time with the natives, who are a non-human population, by the way, out in the swamps, learning swamp craft and all of that sort of thing. And Anijal is the princessy, girly princess who, by the end of the book, winds up inheriting the throne because Haramis got called to become the sorceress protector. Bina is her name. She's basically Bina's successor, so she can't also be queen, and Kadia says at the end that she can't be queen either, and so it all falls to Anijal, who basically, Anijal spends the bulk of these books learning how to grow a spine, because she's very much a princessy princess of the, I'm fluttery, I'm not very brave, I need to be rescued, you know, like, she very much falls into the category of a princess who in another universe would have been rescued by her handsome prince. Um, and when she starts out, she's very much in that state and severely disconcerts the handsome prince she winds up with when you come up on the end of the book, because based on they meet early on in the book, and she's very fainting and shrinking and lovely and delicate and flower-like and so on and so forth. And so he kind of falls in love with, Princess Peach in effect. And by the end of it, he gets a war leader. She's not a trained warrior, but what she is somebody who has a spine and who's brave and daring and and has this core of steel that seems to have come out of nowhere. Um, frankly, really, brain. I really, really love their nurse, because each of them has a Nisomu that there are a bunch of non-human species who collectively they're called oddlings by the humans and call themselves the folk. Um, and there are a bunch of different species of these. There's the Nisomu, the Glismac, the Vispi, who are up in the mountains, Wavilo. There are a lot of them. A lot of different species out there, and I don't remember all their names. The quote-unquote abominable Scrytech, which are kind of like walking crocodiles or, you know, two-legged crocodiles, and are horrifying and terrifying and vicious and weird and horrible. Anyways, but each of them has a Nisomu friend, guide, sidekick, accompanying person. Haramis has Uzan, who is kind of a scholar. He is a musician, and he accompanies her on her quest. And Kadia gets Jagan, who is he's a professional in swampcraft. That he knows the swamps very, very well, and he's a hunter, and that sort of thing. And Anijals is the Nisomo woman who was their nurse when they were children, and she's kind of stuck around. And Imu is hardcore. She is remarkable. Like halfway, three-quarters of the way through the book, they wind up they're in this boat, and they've been traveling along, and they wind up basically the two creatures that pull the boat, this Bramorix, just go straight over a waterfall, and Imu vanishes in the aftermath. And Anijal and the Ramorix think she's dead. We're supposed to think she's dead. And at the very end of the book, as Anijal is leading a sector of the army up to the capital city to reconquer their home, Imu shows up in her wake, stomping around irritably, telling people that her princess needs her, and why aren't they helping her get her a boat and directions and food and clothing right now. And it's remarkable and kind of hilarious, and I love Imu because she is clearly way more hardcore than everyone else in this book. This is really very much a strong female character book, even though several of the female characters, or three major female characters, are very much archetypes. Anyhow, the thing that is interesting in this series, and I'll get to it when I talk about the other books, is that because this book was written by three authors, each of which took a princess, in effect. I mean, I haven't looked into exactly how they did it, but I suspect once the opening setup had been done, that each of them basically just wrote the stories of the respective sisters, and then came together, and they I would be willing to bet that they plotted out roughly what each of them were supposed to be doing, then they went away, wrote their sections, and then came together and fixed them up, because scrying, that is the ability to see people doing stuff very far away with magic, is part of this book, and so they would have to have been careful about that. But anyways, each of these three authors had a sister and wrote that sister. But what's interesting about this series, and it is a series in its way, is that following the publication, each of these authors, Marion Zimmer Bradley, Julian May, and Andre Norton, each of them wrote sequels, but they didn't work together on the sequels. And so when you read those sequels, they don't actually form a coherent, ongoing storyline, an ongoing plot line, an ongoing plot arc to the series. And I'm not going to talk about Andre Norton's sequel, Golden Trillium, because while I read it years ago, I didn't really like it. And it's not that there was anything wrong with it. It's not that there's anything wrong with Andre Norton, but you will probably not find much in the way of books by her in my list, because I've never really enjoyed her books. I've tried reading one or two at various points, and while she's fine for me in co-authorship, I just don't really enjoy her writing, her styling. It's just not to my taste. Nothing wrong with it. I would not be critical of people who liked her books, but I personally don't like them. But I did read Julian May's sequel, Blood Trillium, and Marion Zimmer Bradley's sequel, Lady of the Trillium, which I will be talking about in future weeks. And as I said, it's very interesting because these books are consistent with Black Trillium, but they are not consistent with each other. Also, there is Sky Trillium, which I never read, and I think that was also a Julian May sequel, but I honestly don't know, because having never read it, it doesn't in fact meet my qualifications for this channel, this series, or the ongoing point of the channel, which is books that I have read that I enjoyed. You know, if I haven't read the book, it's not going to make it onto the list because, well, you know, it's not a book that I've read. And I'm not going to read books for the channel. You can also see by this, if you look at the details on this cover, at the top and at the bottom right and so on, that there's folds. That's because this is a book that was published in 1990, and so I've had this book for 10, 20. Yeah, we've had this book in the house for a very, very long time, and it is a little worn. I actually recently had to retape this dust jacket together because there was a huge tear down one part of it. Anyways, neither here nor there. I enjoyed this one. It's very much a strong women protagonists book. It has its flaws, as all these things do. I think one of the flaws that comes into this, I feel, is there's a bit of a flaw in the fact that the way that these books get written, and this is a flaw that also is in one of the other books that actually I'm running low on time, so I'm not going to go into that, but there's a flaw in this one of just how separate their storylines are. But anyways, I will talk more about this series in the next one, which I will pick based on whichever of those were published first, and whichever the sequels were published first, and I guess I will see you all next week.